Welcome everybody back into Nerd Sesh. As always, I'm Carson Bremer and alongside me is Logan Camden. And for those of you who missed it, we were reacting live to the NBA Draft Lottery last night. So we gave our live reactions to all of the first 14 picks. We are going to recap some of that today, but you can find it in much more depth on yesterday's show. What we're going to mostly focus on today is the rest of the first round, talking about some of the winners and losers, some of our biggest takeaways, how some of those big time contending teams who picked later in the draft fared. And if you guys want to make sure that you don't miss any of our content, feel free to subscribe to our YouTube channel so you always know what's going on with the nerds. So Logan, with that being said, let's start in the lottery because that is nevertheless where the biggest names are getting picked. What was your favorite lottery pick yesterday?
I think my favorite pick in the lottery was Zach Edey to the Grizzlies. I just think it's a perfect fit in terms of what Memphis needs, Edey's immediate impact on the game, and what it's going to mean for their team defense. Like, I think it's just going to be really hard to score on the Grizzlies in the half court. Anything inside, the Twin Towers kind of look at Jaren Jackson Jr., and Zach Edey is going to be super intimidating. The other team I want to shout out is one that I've had a little more time to reflect on, and that's the Timberwolves landing Rob Dillingham at 8. The reason I say that is, one, I think they got exceptional value for the pick. They gave up 2 firsts in 6 and 7 years. I think that's insane value for a guy like Dillingham, and in a lot of ways, I think he's exactly what Minnesota needs, an infusion of offense off the bench. You look at their starting 5, Conley, Edwards, McDaniels, Cat, and Gobert, right? They're going to be running back this group likely for the foreseeable future. Minnesota's already got rangy defenders and big guys off the bench, and Naz Reid, Kyle Anderson, and Nickeil Alexander-Walker. Long term, I'm pretty optimistic about Dillingham and this team in this situation. I think he's the most fun player in this class. I think he's super talented, but he's going to a great team. He's going to a good culture and a winning situation where I really think he fits like a glove. Like, this team needs half-court offense off the bench, a little bit of scoring punch, and I think these guys can make up for what he maybe lacks defensively. So I think my favorite 2 lottery picks are the back-to-back ones at 8 and 9. The Grizzlies getting Edey and the Timberwolves getting Dillingham.
Interesting. Both picks that maybe just in terms of the raw value in a vacuum, you would have said were reaches. The Dillingham pick has grown on me because I do think it is a super intuitive fit. You just think about how rough the Timberwolves offense was if you didn't have both Conley and Ant out there. Ideally, if it was just one, then there was just a significant burden on those guys in terms of all creation and decision making, and the shot making around them was going to be questionable. And if you didn't have either of them on the floor, then you were just screwed in terms of offensive skills. So Dillingham definitely does provide a ceiling there that Minnesota needs to unlock somehow long term. Now, I do have concerns beyond the dazzling pull-up shooting, the ball handling, the fluidity that he has on the perimeter about his ability to score and finish around the rim. I have some questions about what his playmaking ceiling is, although I do think he's a good playmaker, but that'll determine sort of to what extent he can be entrusted with lead offensive responsibilities. And then the biggest thing is just defense. 6'1", 6'2", slight guy. He's always going to get attacked on that side of the ball. So I have sort of been of the mind that Dillingham is probably going to end up being just like a really electric 6th man. Awesome scorer, not quite complete enough elsewhere in his game, but he does have a pretty rare offensive ceiling in this class. And if anyone should take a flyer on that, it's Minnesota. The pick is a little bit high for me, just taking him at number 8, but I'm with you. I don't care so much about those 2 picks that they traded down the line. And Edey is a fascinating one. I like that pick at number 9 as well, even though in a vacuum, again, I probably would have said that's a little bit high for Edey. I just think it's the perfect fit. When it comes down to timeline, you're getting one of the most polished and pro-ready dudes, extremely high floor, going to be absurdly productive in his minutes. He's going to eat up rebounds. He's going to bully people out of the post. He's going to finish efficiently out of pick and roll. And specifically, Memphis has desperately needed a legitimate 5 because once Steven Adams got hurt at the end of the 2023 season, they lost so much of what makes them great. This was an elite defensive team, an elite rebounding team. After he got hurt, they dropped to 9th in defensive rating, 23rd in rebound rate. This past year, with him obviously out for the year due to injury and then traded, They were 12th in defensive rating and 25th in rebound rate. So Edey, although he does have some concerns about mobility, guarding in space, and more importantly, maybe specifically in Memphis, just keeping up with the pace that they like to play at because they like to run, and this is a lumbering big man. I think that rim protection, that rebounding, that rim finishing makes him a really intuitive fit for 20, 25 minutes a night. And I'm not maybe the highest on his ceiling because of some of his limitations in terms of defensive versatility, but I am quite high on his floor because of just some of the overwhelming physical traits. I, though, have the team that got who would have been Memphis's dream pick as my biggest winner of the lottery. That's Portland landing Donovan Clingan. It's not necessarily the cleanest in terms of fit right now. You have DeAndre Ayton, you have Robert Williams. It's just the best value. This to me was a top 3 guy on the board at the start of the draft, was arguably the guy with the single highest floor. You're getting elite rim protection. You're getting elite rebounding. You're getting an awesome drop defender. Again, some questions about him guarding in space, although I think he'll do better there than Edey. And then an overwhelming post finisher when he has the right matchup, an overwhelming finisher around the rim out of pick and roll, and a good passer, a guy who can run some of your offense, and he's just massive. So Portland has had their dynamic, fun guard talents. They've added those guys. What they haven't been able to do for the longest time, basically throughout the entirety of Damian Lillard's tenure, and it's only gotten worse and worse, is defend at even a reasonable level. And Ayton is pretty consistently a poor rim protector. He certainly was this past season. People shot as well against him at the rim as they would any other average player, which when you're a big is really not a good number. So Clingan is going to change that. I also do like, just in terms of fit and floor, Devin Carter at 13 to the Kings. I think that is a really good spot for him. A team that is trying to win now, you get a super pro-ready guy, very much a complementary guard. Defend, screen, knock down jumpers off the catch, connective playmaking, rebound really well for your position. That's the sort of guy who I think that they need alongside De'Aaron Fox, and just to make them a better rebounding team overall, a better defending team overall. And then in terms of sheer value, I really like Cody Williams at 10 to the Jazz, and I really like Buzelis at 11 to the Bulls. I thought those were two really promising jack-of-all-trades wings, very, very toolsy. You have little questions about both of them. The shot consistency with Cody Williams, his slightness, maybe the polish of his handle and touch, but you just love the length of most of what you see from him as a ball handler, his ability to attack closeouts, his ability to defend. I'm confident in him growing into his frame athletically because of his brother in some part. And then Buzelis, again, you have some questions about the shot. You have some questions about the self-created offense, but secondary rim protection, rebounding, connective playmaking, transition offense, all those things he's going to be really good at. So those are two guys who, if they are consistent with the shot, just awesome players. I thought they were top 7 prospects. They go 10 and 11 to teams that kind of have blank slates, but if they are going to go anywhere, especially for Chicago, the front court makes sense because you already have Kobe and Io in the backcourt. I thought those were a couple really good picks as well.
Yeah, I like those wing picks. In just terms of value, I mean, those are 2 top 5 guys that I think slipped to the end of the lottery. And I also do like Devin Carter. There weren't a lot of losers in the lottery. If I had to pick one, I think it's interrelated with one of the selections that you made. And that was the Blazers getting Donovan Clingan. That's a winner. The loser is because the Charlotte Hornets ended up passing on Donovan Clingan. Mm-hmm. I just think that fit made a little bit too much sense. If you were listening to our live stream or joined us at all or listened to it in post, we mentioned it on the broadcast. I just think it made so much sense. Like, the Hornets haven't played winning legitimate basketball in years, and haven't played defense in years. Brandon Miller, the clip that I mentioned on the live that stuck out to me was him yelling at his teammates, "Get back!" Like let's play ball. Like there's a stink in the culture in Charlotte, and I really thought Clingan was going to help, one, talent wise, just bring this defense up another notch with what he brings immediately defensively, but could potentially help change the culture. It's not that I hate Salaun as a prospect. I quite like him. I just think that Klingen's an immediate winner, and it just made a lot of sense to go and get a guy that complements Brandon Miller and LaMelo Ball and can make up for some of LaMelo's shortcomings. Again, not that Salaun doesn't fit. I just think Klingen is so ready to win games now and helped win in a meaningful way. And in a lot of ways, I think Salaun's a bit of a project, and as the years is probably years away from being, what he's going to be. I like his motor. I love his defensive intensity. I love his engagement, how he crashes the glass. He does a lot of connective things well, but his offensive game is really, really, really raw. There's just a lot more polish and confidence in Klingen's floor than I get with Salaun.
Agreed. I just think that Klingen is a better prospect by a good bit. My confidence in his floor is immense. Like, I know that he's going to be a good starter. Salaun, there is such a wide range of outcomes, and whatever advantage he might have in ceiling does not, to me, offset that massive gap in floor. That's not to say that I don't like Salaun. He's an awesome athlete. I love his motor, as you mentioned, defensive versatility, cutting. But, like, that shot is a big question. Everything in terms of his offensive polish is a big question. And if you could have had your star guard, your star wing, and your really, really quality two-way defensive big, that would have been a really nice foundation, and I would have drafted to replace Mark Williams. I just think Klingen is clearly a level above him as a prospect. So I definitely thought that was a miss for Charlotte on multiple fronts. I thought it was a reach for Salaun, and they passed on a top 3 prospect who they could have had at 6, who makes sense in terms of fit. I'm going to go with the Detroit Pistons as my loser of the lottery, Logan. Back-to-back picks that were pretty controversial and had some things in common just in terms of banking on athleticism, banking on dudes who have these sort of potentially really versatile two-way skill sets. But the offensive skill, and particularly the shot, is a big question. Holland, I would say, has more concrete strengths in his game right now than Salaun. But the biggest weakness that he has is his jump shooting. And that's where Detroit is just the one spot you don't want a guy like that to go. I have grown increasingly concerned the more I've thought about it, and I was already concerned on the broadcast last night, just about that fit. This is a team that was 29th in threes made, 26th in three-point percentage last year, and you already have your non-shooting freak athlete, do-everything guy on the wings. That's Ausar Thompson. You want to add another guy like that into the mix? It's just very concerning to me. Teams are already able to load up on Cade. They are already able to play those gaps so aggressively, to pack paints. You need somebody who can hold defenses accountable with their pure spot-up shooting, with their consistent creation alongside Cade. You just need more offensive skill above anything else. Athleticism in the front court is great. It cannot come at the expense of being able to knock down open shots to keep defenses honest, of being able to take some work off the plate of Cade Cunningham. And I'm just concerned that from that perspective, Holland is not the guy. And things with him and Ausar could get clunky. And even best case scenario, it's not like both those guys are going to figure out the shot. I don't think Ausar is ever going to figure out the shot. I'd be surprised if he did. So that to me is just a counterintuitive fit. There wasn't some super high floor polished offensive player who you could have taken in this range if it wasn't going to be Knecht, who ends up falling all the way to 17, and I do think that would have been a little high for him. But I think I would have been more confident in Cody Williams in the situation, Buzelis. Like, those are shots who I would say I'm more confident in than Ron Holland. It's a specifically clunky pick and probably a little bit of a reach in a vacuum, in my opinion, as well. All right, let's go outside of the lottery, Logan, to the picks that we haven't reacted to on the show yet. Who was your biggest winner who picked after we went off the air last night?
There were a lot of good picks outside of the lottery. I think my favorite was the Utah Jazz. I think the Jazz got the best point guard in the draft at 29 in Isaiah Collier. Like, I love this kid's game, man. The general feel and pace that I get with him is my lead point guard. I love his feel out of the pick and roll. His strength, his ability to play physically, to finish through contact, his creative at-rim finishing. I think Collier can finish with both hands. I think he's got good touch. Like, that's my favorite aspect of Collier's game. I love how he can play physically, but how he can also play with finesse. I think he's good exploding off the dribble. He's got solid speed and acceleration and change in pace. I think he's a good shooter. You see the flashes of the off-the-dribble shooting, some from super deep. He's a beast in transition. He's a good passer and decision maker. Like, the one knock I think that you can have on Collier is the fact that he is an undersized guard. Obviously, bigger offensive players are going to be able to attack him if they involve him in switches, but I really think he makes up for it with effort and engagement. But I really think Collier could be one of the best guards in the league one day, man. I really believe that. I think he is a true hidden gem in this draft. Collier was the player with the biggest discrepancy between where I had him on my big board and where he got drafted. I think this is the second year in a row that the Utah Jazz have gotten a stud guard late in the draft. Last year, they got one of my favorite guards in Keyonte George, and this year, they get my favorite point guard in the class in Isaiah Collier. I mean, this was an absolute steal to me.
I do like the Collier pick at 29. I'm not as high on him as you are, I think, because some of the things that you're praising haven't been the most consistent. The jump shot has not been super consistent. The playmaking is good. He can also get careless with the basketball. But I do think he does a lot of things pretty well. I think he's a pretty good athlete. He's certainly strong, as you mentioned. I do think that he's going to compete defensively at the very least. It's not like he's super undersized. He just doesn't have great size necessarily at the position. 29 is really good value for him, and I'll be interested to see what that fit looks like with him and Keyonte George, because Keontae's a pretty versatile guy. He's got the playmaking chops. He is a pretty skilled shot creator for himself from beyond the arc. I think he can also play off ball some and knock down some shots off the catch. I think Utah probably should move Sexton pretty soon just because he played so well this past year. I think that he probably has more value elsewhere than in Utah. But overall, I like this draft for the Jazz. You weren't too focused about the positions of need necessarily, although I think that worked out pretty nicely. But mostly you just got the best players on the board. And now you have a collection of young guys with Keyonte, with Walker Kessler. We'll see what happens with Taylor Hendricks as he plays more, but I did like him as a prospect. Collier and Cody Williams, like, there's a nice balance on your roster there. You have some quality wings, you have some quality ball handling, and you have your legit rim protecting big. I definitely thought that was a good pick as well. I didn't expect Collier to stay on the board for that long. My favorite pick outside of the lottery, though, is probably Dalton Knecht to the Lakers at number 17. Just in terms of pure value, really surprising to me that he stayed on the board for so long. As we've said several times, a lot of this draft is about banking on the dudes who you're confident are going to be good, not gambling on the dudes who maybe, potentially, but most likely will not be great. And Dalton Knecht is a guy who I'm quite confident in being good. He is, at this point, the most polished scorer in the class, and specifically this fit with the Lakers is so intuitive. He's 23 years old. This is a team that has no interest in developing unproven guys. Saw how it went with Jalen Hood-Schifino this past year. He wasn't able to get on the floor. Knecht is immediately going to be so much more ready to contribute, and he's going to do it in a way that is kind of unique to this Lakers offense because they've leaned so much into, okay, we're taking some ball handling responsibilities off of LeBron's hands, that their second and third best offensive players like are really good catch and shooters in Austin Reeves and D'Lo, but they're sort of primarily, let me operate with the ball in my hands, let me run pick and roll. Dalton Knecht is just like a seamless off-ball fit, right? He is going to constantly be moving. He is going to cut. He's going to curl around screens. He's going to be a knockdown shooter in those spots. He can attack closeouts. He can drive in those situations, but so much of it will come within the flow. That's part of what I loved about him as a prospect. He can be a lead guy in a college situation like at Tennessee, but he's going to fit anywhere at the next level, and specifically on a team that does already have multiple ball handlers. I think injecting that sort of offense from a guy who can do so damage away from the ball is really, really going to be a positive for them. And it gives you sort of a balanced look where now it's like, okay, if we want two offensive guards on the floor, it doesn't necessarily have to be D'Lo and Austin Reeves, especially if a D'Lo is struggling, as we've seen in the playoffs. It can be Austin Reeves and Dalton Knecht, the honky backcourt. But then you do have a bit more of a balance in terms of skill set, and I think he's just going to fit really well with LeBron, too. LeBron pressures the rim, you got another great shooter to kick out to. Just like Austin Reeves, has those ghost screens that he sets for LeBron that are so effective. I think Dalton Knecht can do the same. It's a really, really good pick for LA.
Yeah, I really think it's an intuitive fit here in LA. The Lakers were 26th in three-pointers attempted last season, 25th in three-point percentage. It fits a really, really clear need for LA. And I agree with a lot of what you said, man. Like, he's going to do all the off-ball stuff. You don't need another ball handler. And also, I'm so glad that the Lakers went ahead and picked a guy who is ready. Last year, going with guys like Hood Schifino and Maxwell Lewis, who, are years away. Didn't even crack the rotation last season. You need immediate impact guys, and Dalton Knecht falling to them is like a match made in heaven, too. Especially with the fact that if D'Angelo Russell's shot is not hitting, you just say, hey, man, you can go have a seat over here and go sit in your corner. We'll get some shooters out here who can actually knock down shots. He's an immediate winner, and he is just such a complimentary piece to what LA's going to want to do, man. I think it is one of the biggest steals in the draft, probably second, next to Collier going to the Jazz for me. Another big winner to me, Carson, was another one of my favorite prospects going to the Miami Heat, and that's Kel'el Ware. One, I think it addresses a very, very big need that Miami has, a real bench five that can bolster a defense. 7'2", 7-4 wingspan. Like, this guy is rangy. He is long. He is tall. I think he's got a really high defensive ceiling, but I think he's also immediately disruptive. I love how he defends the pick and roll. This guy hunts rebounds. He's great at tracking the ball. He's super fluid. And I also think that potentially you could run lineups, Carson. It's a little janky against bigger teams. I think you could run a lineup of maybe Bam Adebayo at the 4 and Ware at the 5 if you really need a lot of size out there. I also like the flashes of the offensive game that we've seen from Ware. And I want to be clear about something. Like, there's not a ton of polish here, but he shot 43% from behind the arc. Like, there's a little bit of a shot there. But there's also some post-game where you see glimpses of him rising and firing on post fades over his shoulder. Mm-hmm. The shot looks pretty smooth. He's a ways away there. So he's going to need to develop his offensive game for sure, but he is an immediate impact defender. The Heat have not had a backup five that they can really rely on in non-Adebayo minutes. They completely address that, but like I said, I think potentially if you need to go jumbo-sized against other teams, he could coexist alongside Bam. I think it's a great pick at really good value at a position of need for Miami, so I love Ware to the Heat.
Absolutely. I do think he's more like 7 foot flat than 7'2". He's not on the Donovan Clingan massive level, but he's a big dude, and this has just been a glaring need for Miami. Now, would I love for them to take a big wing like Tristan da Silva? Yes, but you can't keep trotting out Kevin Love as your backup center. That's not a viable long-term plan. The question with Ware is just how legitimate is the shot? Because he had an awesome three-point shooting this past year. He was like 43%, but that wasn't something that he flashed really the year prior. It wasn't on super high volume. And the free throw shooting is much more questionable at 66%. But I do think you're getting that defensive and athletic foundation with clear upside for him to be quality stretch big. So I do think that it's a pretty good pick, definitely at a position of need. I'm going to stick in this sort of mid-lottery range for my next favorite pick, and it's involving a guy who I just mentioned in the Southeast Division. We can stay in that region of the NBA. The Orlando Magic at number 18 get Tristan da Silva, Logan. And I just love da Silva. This is a guy who I would have been comfortable taking in the lottery because I think his floor is so high. I think he clearly has one of the handful of highest floors in this class. So I wanted to see him go to any team that was in a win-now situation and needed some of that versatility, needed some of that support in the front court. A guy who can rebound, play make, shoot from three, drive, attack in transition, defend multiple positions. Da Silva legitimately does all of those things. He does everything at at least a B level. Orlando is ironically not the spot that needs him the most because they already have two big foundational forwards with Paolo and Franz, of course. They also have a really dynamic, on the defensive end, backup four with Jonathan Isaac. So they have their fair share of big, rangy front court athletes who are versatile. I still don't care, though. If you get da Silva at 18, that to me is a win no matter what. But there were some teams that were needier for a guy in that mold, like Miami, like Philly, like even the Lakers, but I'm very good with them taking Knecht. But I didn't want to see da Silva slide any further than this, and I'm glad that he's in a situation where he's going to be in the playoffs in year one because you can absolutely trust him in those situations in a way that you can't with most other dudes in this class. I just hope he doesn't get buried in the rotation.
This is one of the funniest picks to me in terms of just Orlando is stockpiling big, long, talented wings now. And, I wondered about the fit too, but I also go, damn, man, you really can't have enough of these guys. So I'm also intrigued at how he's going to coexist alongside these guys. I also hope he doesn't get buried in the rotation, but
the Franz at the 2 lineup. They're not ready for the Franz, Paolo, De Silva lineup.
Who the hell is scoring on these guys, man? I mean, that's one thing, though, dude. I mean, there's going to be a lot of long, rangy, great defensive athletes out there. The final big winner to me is someone who, in a lot of ways, is similar to De Silva in his win-now skill set, and that was Deron Holmes to Denver. One, I think this guy complements Jokic in a lot of ways where you could potentially run lineups at the 4 with him. As a pick and roller, as a pick and popper, as a defender. But I love what this does for Denver's bench. Denver has been strapped for just impact players off the bench, period. Now you're going to have Christian Brown. Now you're going to have Peyton Watson. You've got your wings. Now you actually have a guy who you are confident in trotting out as a backup 5 and backup 4. Holmes just does a lot of little things, man. Again, creating out of the pick and roll offensively and pick and pop game, defending the pick and roll defensively, protecting the rim, defending in space. He's slightly undersized at the 5 spot at 6'9", but he also has a really, really long wingspan that helps make up for that. So I just like that it addresses a really, really clear need for Denver. And he's such a multifaceted guy that I think he can run the 5, but he can also run the 4 spot alongside Jokic. It just addresses such a clear need for Denver.
It is a really strong pick, and it's always been pretty clear that this was the direction that they were going to go, because sitting at 28, that was always the plan. They end up having to move up to 22, but I think that that's the right play for them. There has not been a more glaring need on this roster for several years than a legitimate backup big. Somebody who can at least bring you as much defensive value as Nikola Jokic, which is certainly not the higher bar that you're trying to hit there. And Deron Holmes can easily do that. You're talking about a guy who legitimately is going to protect the rim at a high level. And then offensively, I do think can attack mismatches when he has a smaller player on him. I do think we'll be able to space the floor. We have seen some flashes of ball handling. He's going to have to be consistent in a lot of these respects, really, in terms of spacing the floor. I think he's going to be a good role man no matter what, but definitely you get more value with him when he can be effective as a popper. And that is some legitimate pressure to put on any rookie in a situation like Denver. You see it last year where none of those guys are ready to play just yet, right? Julian Strawther, even considered one of the most pro-ready guys, he's not cracking the playoff rotation. But Denver didn't even have a playoff center last year. And I do think that this makes them more viable in those situations. It makes them more viable throughout the regular season. It makes it so when you're in a Game 7, maybe you don't have to play Nikola Jokic 47 minutes. You have somebody else who you can trust to at least capably fill those 5 minutes on your roster. I think that's the right pick for those reasons. And I also think that very similarly, the pick right before that, Yves Missy going to the Pelicans at 21, was the right pick for a lot of similar reasons. You're just looking at teams that have had very clear needs at center. For Denver, it was the backup center. For New Orleans, it's just the fact that Jonas Valanciunas is pretty obviously not capable of continuing to start for this team. He's too slow-footed defensively. He's not even offering you much rim protection. And then you have his slow-footedness offensively, his lack of floor spacing. I understand that he can shoot a decent percentage from 3, but he's not willing to take those looks. Like, all those things have just sort of clogged things up for this New Orleans team. And they are rich with athletes. They are rich with great wings and a lot of good perimeter players. The 5 has been the biggest question mark. I like Larry Nance. I like his versatility. I like his effort, his athleticism at the 5, switchability. But he's just too small at the end of the day. And sometimes he can knock down a wide open 3, but certainly not a floor spacing big. And you're not going to get the floor spacing with Missy. You're just getting a more consistent baseline in terms of this is a big who can legitimately consistently act as a vertical threat offensively, who defensively can consistently protect the rim, who I do think should be able to guard some in space. They needed that guy. They had to address that in the draft. You were not going to run it back with Valanciunas and Nance as your centers for next year. That's been the biggest concern. They have other big things to work through, such as what do we do with CJ and BI? Do you move off of one? We'll see what they do in terms of their perimeter star power alongside Zion, but I think this is a much better outlook for them. Being this athletic, both on the wings and with your big, having a legit rim protector and rim finisher, to me makes a lot of sense. Get ready for a night full of big fights and big action. It's UFC 303, and it can be even bigger. Jump in on all the action at DraftKings Sportsbook, the official sports betting partner of UFC.
It's super easy for first-timers to get started. Try betting on something simple like picking a fighter to win. Go to the DraftKings Sportsbook app, select your fighter, and place your first bet. It's that simple. The light heavyweight title is on the line in the main event, but there are so many more amazing matchups happening in Vegas.
And speaking of amazing, if you're new to DraftKings, listen up. New customers can bet $5 to get $150 in bonus bets instantly. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app now and use code NERDS. That's code NERDS for new customers to get $150 in bonus bets when you bet just $5. Get that big fight feel only on DraftKings. DraftKings, the crown is yours. Let's flip this on its head, Logan. What was your least favorite pick? Who was the biggest loser outside the lottery?
My least favorite pick, and by far the strangest pick in the first round to me, was the Bucks taking A.J. Johnson. The only reason I say this is just because when you look at the Bucks timeline, their top 5 guys are all 29 years or older. Giannis is 29. Dame is 33. Middleton is 32. Lopez is 36. Bobby Portis is 29. And so the Bucks turn around and they draft a slight-framed guard who is likely years away from giving you meaningful minutes. Yeah, it just left me scratching my head a little bit. You know, they go with a young athlete. He's 6'5", 160 pounds, a 6'9" wingspan, 38-inch vert. Like, the measurables are cool. But this is a guy who averaged 3 points, 1 rebound, and 2 assists in the NBL last season. You know, I mean, he couldn't crack an NBL rotation, and so I'm just concerned in terms of what are we doing here, Milwaukee? Like, in a lot of ways, it feels like the Golden State dilemma. It's like, why are you taking a guy who might help you win games in 4 to 5 seasons? We need a guy who can help us win basketball games right now, and yeah, I don't know. I didn't have this guy on my big board to go anywhere close to the first round, Carson. Frankly, you know, this was a second-round guy to me. Like, I had heard he had been shooting up draft boards, but I thought, you know, maybe he shoots up to the late 30s, to the mid-40s. Not in the mid-20s and not to a contender. I just think when you are so strapped in terms of cap space because you have these big contracts like Middleton, like Lillard, like Giannis, this is a pick where you need to capitalize on somebody who can help you win games right now on a cheap contract for the next 4 years. You got to maximize this pick. You got to get somebody that can help you win games now. And A.J. Johnson, in a lot of ways, is the furthest prospect from that. Like, for the majority of, like, these teams who drafted here late, I like their draft. Like, even if I don't think you absolutely crushed it, I liked the guy that they picked, or I can see the vision. I don't see it at all with the A.J. Johnson pick.
I agree. This is my least favorite pick of the first round. We also didn't mention with our least favorite picks of the lottery, Reece Shea at number 1 to Atlanta, which I don't think either of us like, but we've kind of beaten that horse to death and then beaten it while it's already dead. I'm with you. The timeline just does not make sense here. This is a guy who is struggling to get on the floor in the NBL, an exceptionally unproven prospect, and he's got some wiggle. He's super quick. He's got a nice handle. He's got a good-looking shot. Like, that's not to say that he cannot bring you some offensive value from the guard spot down the line. But for a team that's picking 23rd, that is not just trying to contend, that desperately needs to find ways to improve on the margins with some of the most limited asset pools in the league. Like, that is the situation that the Bucks are in. They are maybe the one team that cannot afford to miss on a pick like this. They don't have their first next year. I believe they only outright own one of their first round picks through 2030. Now, a couple of those are swaps, which they'll probably keep, or they'll at least pick somewhere. But those are not going to be good first round picks. They're going to be picking in the 20s again in several years. They're just not going to have a pick whatsoever. So you have to make the most of every asset that you can possibly acquire. And I get it. Some of the dudes who I would have loved for Milwaukee to get were already off the board. I would have liked to see them get an athletic big like a De'Ron Holmes, like an Yves Missy. Those guys went off the 2 picks before. I would have liked to see them add a wing like a Jalen Tyson. He went off the board 3 picks before. But you still had an Isaiah Collier on the board who, if you were looking for somebody to bring a little bit of injection at the guard spot, he would be more apt to do, and he would be more competitive immediately as an NBA athlete and on the defensive side of the ball. If you wanted a more versatile offensive big, Kyle Filipowski was there, who ends up not going in the first round, but I would have been much more confident in contributing immediately. Terrence Shannon, who goes a few picks later, grown-ass man, 23 years old, almost 24, I'm pretty sure. Gonna defend. You think he's probably gonna knock down shots. He's an NBA athlete with a grown man body. He could contribute. If you just wanted more bench offense, somebody to stabilize that second unit, Tyler Kolek is out there, another really safe guy who ends up not going on the first day. And you just kind of sat there as some of the teams in front of you drafted guys who were intuitive fits for you. So I just can't wrap my head around the process here. I can't. There's not a player who is farther away who went in the first round. Like, I would say this guy is farther away than Salaun, just considering the complete lack of production that we got from him last year. And you needed somebody, particularly a wing or a big. Like, guard to me is not even the position of need, who can win now. In 3 years, Damian Lillard is going to be old, man. So we'll see what they do with Brook Lopez. We'll see what they do with Chris Middleton. But they have to be proactive. They have to make big moves, because I get that you were really good in the regular season, but you're still not that close. I mean, you're really slow. You were struggling to defend. You're just clearly lacking in athleticism compared to a lot of these other awesome teams. And you had an opportunity to try to address that, and you didn't.
Yeah, and I felt like the no-brainer was Terrence Shannon Jr., who is just another home run pick to me by Minnesota. You want to talk about absolutely crushing this draft. Like, I think, Tim Connolly to land Dillingham for that value and then to get Terrence Shannon Jr. later in the draft is an absolute steal. But to me, he was the no-brainer pick for Milwaukee. Like,
yeah,
dude, all the things you said. You need a big athlete, a guy who's a beast in transition. He's got grown man strength. He's 23 years old. He can shoot. He can do it all right now, and he's ready. That's the most important thing, man. And he's ready. So I question the motivations of this pick. Like, are you planning for is this a post Damian Lillard world pick? Like, what are we doing, man?
No, they have to think he's going to get on the floor sooner than that. But it's just so disappointing, because you so clearly have needed a wing who can defend and knock down shots. You've had the sort of one-way answers. Andre Jackson Jr., who can defend, but offensively is not going to be consistent enough. Beauchamp ultimately hasn't been a high enough level defender to where it's like, okay, let's consistently put him in the rotation. And it's tough to put that burden on a young guy no matter what, but Terrence Shannon is damn near not a young guy, dude. When you can get like a grown man like that, who you're going to be more comfortable playing rotation minutes than just about in this range at a position of need, and your goal is all about what can we do this year. We traded for Damian Lillard. Remember that? We went all in on this group. It's disappointing for me to Milwaukee. It really is a head-scratching pick on multiple fronts. The value is one thing. This being the team to do it with their timeline makes it 20 times weirder. I do not like this from the Bucks. Okay, let's just talk about some of the other picks that we haven't had a chance to touch on yet. Jared McCain to the Sixers at number 16, Logan. How do you feel about this pick?
I'm okay with McCain. I think I would have liked the Sixers going with a wing instead, with the impending free agency of like a Kelly Oubre. McCain's interesting to me, man, because I just worry about his archetype and him staying on the floor as a slight, smaller guard. He's going to bring you shooting. He's going to bring you, veteran decision making out of the pick and roll. I trust the guy to make decisions. He's not a super explosive athlete. He's not a really high impact defender. Like, I just look at this guy as a straight up floor spacer. To me, just wasn't the most valuable need for Philadelphia, and I just worry about his archetype just as a smaller guard. I don't hate the pick. I just probably would have gone in a different direction with what this team needs. But he's definitely going to bring you shooting, man. That's one of the things that you don't have to question about McCain. Like, he's going to bring you really reliable floor spacing and secondary creation.
I think it's a solid pick. Would I have preferred them getting Tristan da Silva? Yes. I'm sorry. I'm going to say that for everybody in this range for whom I feel that it is true. And I agree with you in terms of wings being a big position of need, because they could damn near start from scratch there. It's not just Kelly Oubre. It's Nick Batum, right? Like, Tobias Harris is obviously finally going to be gone. They've got a lot of minutes to fill in that position group. But because they are starting from scratch, I'm good with them taking a guy who I'm sure they felt was quite a safe pick. You are getting a really, really good shooting prospect who's going to compete defensively, who's going to be a sound decision maker. Do I think that he is the highest upside guy? No, and I probably would have preferred a bigger athlete, but I think this is a pretty solid pick overall. Okay, how about Jalen Tyson to the Cleveland Cavaliers, Logan? Cal Bear Jalen Tyson at number 20.
Yeah, I like the pick for Cleveland here. A little bit of a do-it-all wing, and that's kind of exactly what Cleveland needs. These guys were trotting out a Morris twin and Georges Niang for playoff minutes, man. I mean, that just cannot be happening in the year 2024. So it addresses a clear need for them. I just think they desperately needed an athletic do-it-all wing. Tyson brings some veteran polish, brings some defense, brings some shooting, just a little bit of everything. I really like this pick for Cleveland. I think it addresses their biggest need. I'm still concerned long-term, big picture about Cleveland on the whole, the fit with Jared Allen and Evan Mobley and the fit with Garland and Mitchell, all the things that we've discussed about Cleveland for a long time now. Those things I'm definitely still concerned about, but you needed another really talented wing. And, he brings you a little bit more size too, right? Strus is a little bit undersized, Okoro's a little bit undersized, Tyson's a little bit bigger. I think this is the biggest need for Cleveland. I think I prefer Keyshawn George a little bit to Tyson.
You'll rue the day.
But I like this pick. I don't know, man. Keyshawn George is a really good defender.
You'll rue the day that you said that. No, I thought that Keyshawn George was good value at 24 to Washington. But I love me a little Jalen Tyson. Now, he is a Cal Bear, and I love the California Golden Bears, and they haven't had an NBA player since Ivan Rabb in 2017 drafted. So it's been a long, long time waiting to get back to this place. But I really do like Tyson, and I do think that this is a really good spot for him, and I thought he was undervalued. When people were talking about him as an early second-round kind of guy, I would have preferred taking him in the early 20s like he ultimately did go. Now, he's not a big wing. I mean, I would say in terms of build, he is pretty darn similar to Okoro. I mean, he's maybe 6'6", 6'8" wingspan. He plays pretty big. He's a really good positional rebounder. He's strong as hell, but he's not going to be a guy that you're playing at the 4 or whatever if maybe you weren't familiar with his game and you had that in mind. But he is a really versatile offensive player, and that to me is valuable in Cleveland because you have so many guys who are one-dimensional and might not even be that great at that one dimension, or they're inconsistent shooters. That is kind of the one concern with Tyson, is how reliable is the three-point shot going to be. He's a little streaky there, but he was 36% from deep this year, really good from the line. And you're getting a guy who's going to do a bunch of things to help you win. You want him to screen, he will absolutely do that. You need him to crash the glass, he will do that. You want him to run some pick and roll possessions and play make, he can do that. He was better than 70th percentile as a pick and roll creator, isolation creator, and a post-up player. He's got that little back to the basket game. He's a physical, shifty sort of wing, and he can defend multiple positions, and he's going to compete there. So he is one of the most complete wings who Cleveland could have taken, and I think that that's a good thing. right? Okoro came into the league, and although he's obviously improved as a shooter, like he was just raw athlete. And unfortunately, his shot really let him down in these playoffs. And the shooting overall from Cleveland was, again, really rough in these playoffs. Tyson's not a marksman, but he brings so many positive traits overall that I think this is a good pick for them at a position of need. Okay, how about Tijdane going to the Knicks at number 25, Logan? And the Knicks also trade. They do all sorts of weird stuff, but they end up not using their second pick because they were at 24 and 25. They trade out of 24 to move back to 26. Then they trade out of 26. But how do you like Tijdane going to New York?
Tidane's cool. I mean, he's younger. I like his size that he brings. I think he's got a ways to go, right? I don't think this is a guy that's probably going to play immediately. And I think the Knicks are kind of in a position to do that. I think with getting a guy like the Knicks did get Kaishan, right? They didn't trade that pick. Oh no, the Wizards got Kaishan. I kind of wish the Knicks had gotten Kaishan. Man, that actually makes me look at this a little different. I was under the impression George had gone to the Knicks. I'm okay with it. I don't know. I would probably just prefer winning now, guys. Like, you don't really need a ton if you're New York, so I understand it to an extent, right? Like, your rotation for the most part is carved out, but just with injuries in the NBA, I would always err on the side of I want guys who can play immediately. I just think Tijdane is a couple of years away from really being what he's going to be or really, playing a lot of minutes in a rotation. I probably would have preferred in a little bit more of a winning now asset. But I don't hate Tijdane as a prospect. I just think he's a few years away.
I think it'll be interesting to see what the Knicks are planning on doing here. My Knicks friend Ethan texted me. He says, I think that they're making a push to keep Hartenstein. We'll see what they end up doing. I would have liked to see them go with a big in this spot, and a lot of the dudes went off the board in the early 20s, but I like Filipowski, man. I thought he should have gone day one. I think he's really, really a strong offensive player. Versatile, can handle, can shoot, can post up, can finish around the rim, can play make. And then defensively, he's not going to be great, but he can guard in space, and he can protect the rim pretty well. Like, I think he is going to make some teams wish that they had drafted him. And if you do lose Hartenstein or Robinson, and you're probably going to lose one, I would like to have another viable option there. New York is pretty rich with wings at this point, post-Mikal trade. I like Tijdane. I do think there are guys who are more pro-ready. Terrence Shannon would be more pro-ready. But I like this guy's tools. And I don't think that New York is in a position where it's like, although they are a win-now team, they're not like, oh man, we need more rotation guys who can play. Like, their depth is obviously a real strong point already. Guy's 6'8". I like his shot a lot. He's not just a pure three-point shooter. He's willing to utilize the mid-range, attacking closeouts, really smooth there. He's got some pretty legit playmaking chops, like some flashes of what he can do on ball. And then I think he can attack closeouts. He's a pretty good athlete, and he can defend. So there's a lot of tools that I like with him. He's probably not going to be a guy who factors into the equation for you this year. Maybe there were more pro-ready guys. Filipowski is probably just the one spot where I go position of need and ready to contribute. But I don't dislike this pick. I like the talent. Now, Logan, really interesting pick. Again, the Knicks traded out of this one at 26. So OKC could get Dylan Jones out of Weber State, who was not widely considered a first-round talent. What was your thoughts on this one?
Yeah, I went back and watched some of Dylan Jones last night. I think the guy's got solid game. Last season, 21, 11 and 5, I think. He's 6'6", with a 6'11" wingspan. Just kind of do it all wing. Like, Oklahoma City just finds these guys, man. Like, he's a jumbo-sized guy who can handle the ball. He can get to the hoop. He can finish through contact. Can finish with both hands. Can play with his back to the basket. Like, I like his measurables. I like his size. And I like how many different ways he impacts the game, man. Scoring, rebounding, playmaking, defending. He does a lot of things at a really high level. I think it might be another steal by OKC, man. I can see this guy playing the 2 if you need. I can see this guy playing the 3 if they need. And he does a lot of complementary things. He was not in my first round. I did not expect him to get taken this early, but Yeah, I like Oklahoma City getting another guy who is rotational ready and ready to play tomorrow. So in that regard, I think it's a good pick, man. You can't ever have enough of these, really good multifaceted big guys.
I don't know that I like this one quite as much as you do. Now, he's a very interesting player when you're talking about 6'5", 240 ball handler. It's an interesting skill set. And he certainly knows how to use that strength and size. He's a physical driver. He's good finishing through contact. Pretty good use of angles. Good touch. Pretty shifty. Like, he's a good mover for the amount of weight that he carries. He handles the ball well. He's a pretty good passer. He can be a bit careless with it, a bit turnover prone. My biggest concern with him is just how he hangs defensively. Because, unsurprisingly, at that size, he's not quick laterally. And he's not really bringing you the sort of value as an interior defender that you might like from a guy with those perimeter limitations. He's nothing as a secondary rim protector. Like, that's not his role whatsoever. He's only a 12th percentile post defender, and you would think if there's anything that a big, stout wing can do, it's defend the post. But there were a few possessions watching back there where I'm like, you should have offered more resistance. Like, you kind of got cooked in this, and I'm not sure that should have been the case. Sometimes it's just guys shooting over him, but sometimes it's guys like sort of going through him, which shouldn't happen if he's committed to that end. So I think that there were safer picks, and ultimately I'm just a little bit frustrated that OKC hasn't taken a good hard look at that front court. Taking Topic 12th, I love the value. I love the talent. I see the vision. The shot has to be more consistent for him to work off ball alongside SGA, but he's an 87% free throw shooter. Like, there's reason to think that he will progress. And then if he does, you get an awesome playmaker at 6'7", really good ball handler, shifty driver, and you need more mature offensive players. You need more creation and playmaking, because this past year we saw the inconsistency of everybody other than SGA there really exposed by Dallas. It was rough for them in that respect. But now you pick at 12, you trade up to pick at 26. You don't look at the 4 spot either time. We'll see what their plan is there. But I hope that they are not of the belief that, like, we don't need to size up at all. We don't need to improve on the glass at all, because I do think they do. And Dylan Jones is an excellent positional rebounder, 10 rebounds a game kind of guy. I also want to see if his shot is consistent, though, because he was 32% from deep, 82% free throw shooter, really good touch in that respect. But we have a pretty good sample size of him beyond the arc now. We're talking about a 4-year player who's consistently been in a high volume role, and he's just 32% from the college 3-point line. So I'm not super optimistic about him being more than a mediocre 3-point shooter. So it's not my favorite pick for OKC. It's fun. He's a unique player. I like that. But it's not my favorite pick.
I just wanted to mention, they also did give up 5 second-round picks to go and acquire this guy. So
kind of weird. I mean, it's fine. They have more picks overall than anybody could ever use in a lifetime.
I think that just speaks to how confident Oklahoma City's scouting, and front office team has to be in this kid. But I'm 100% with you. I think the most overlooked thing about the Thunder's draft is the fact that they didn't go with a guy at the 4 or the 5 spot. I still think it's their biggest need. And if I'm looking at the crop of guys that are still available here at the top of the second, I might see if I could trade back in and go and get one of those guys. Like, I think if you could get Filipowski in the early 30s, that is a home run hit.
Yeah, I'm trying not to bring up Filipowski with every pick, but, like, if there's anywhere he makes sense, it's OKC. You maintain your offensive identity. You have a dude who can space the floor, who can handle, who can create, he can run inverted pick and roll for you, yippee. And he can defend reasonably well. And he can play the 4, and he can be a backup 5 for you. Both things which OKC needs, in my opinion. I just thought passing up on him was not the right call. Okay, how about Terrence Shannon going to Minnesota at 27, Logan? I know you said that you like this pick, but why?
Yeah, I just think, one, Terrence Shannon brings a lot of polish, man, and a lot of experience. I love how consistently he gets downhill, man. He's a really good athlete. I think he's going to be menacing in transition. And again, you think about the context of his role within this Minnesota team, I think he fits perfectly. It's another really athletic guy who can defend. Perfect. I trust his shot. You've seen some flashes of his game off the dribble, but I think in this role, he'll be more just, we need you to defend at a high level. We need you to knock down your open shots. We need you to make good decisions. And Maybe he can take on a secondary or tertiary ball handling role off the bench where, he's getting into the teeth of the defense and creating a little bit. But yeah, I mean, it's just another really athletic wing with a lot of polish who's going to defend at a high level. That's a really valuable archetype, but especially in Minnesota, I just love how the things are coming together for Minnesota, man. Next year, like, your bench is going to be Dillingham, Terrence Shannon, Kyle Anderson, Naz Reid, Nickeil Alexander-Walker. That's money to me, man. That is money. That's 10 guys that I really trust to go out there and give me minutes every single night. I think Minnesota absolutely crushed this draft. I think I had Terrence Shannon like almost lottery. I think I had him like in the early 20s, so I think this is pretty good value for this pick too, man. I really like Terrence Shannon's game.
He fits their identity, and he fits their timeline. And it's not just the defense. He's a pretty good shooter. I think he is a guy who plays with some maturity. Like, he's a high IQ cutter. I just trust him to contribute immediately for a number of reasons. His athleticism, his skill set, his age. I think that this is a good pick for them. You can argue that they already have so many quality defensive wings, and offense isn't necessarily the strength for Shannon, but I do think he's solid there. I think he's a really, really solid all-around wing. Okay, how about the Suns taking Ryan Dunn at number 28 out of UVA, Logan? What was your take on this?
Oh my gosh, man. This is the most Suns pick of all time. Let's go ahead. Let's get a one-way guy. Look, I am a UVA fan. I am a struggling UVA fan. Ryan Dunn can defend his ass off. He might be the best perimeter defender in this class. The tools, the athleticism, the intensity, he brings it all. But to me, it's like, okay, let's bring in another Josh Okogie, man. Let's bring in another guy who is like completely offensively inept. Dunn's offensive game is raw, man. And so he's going to complement these scorers in terms of he's going to do the little junkyard stuff. He's going to defend. He's going to rebound. But I just worry about teams being able to counter him offensively, much like they do the other Suns guys, where they just load up on the stars and let him shoot in the corner or let him shoot. That's my one concern with a guy like Dunn. I trust him defensively. I trust him athletically. This guy's a veteran, but just in terms of how teams I think are going to be able to counter his skill set, like, I'm just going to leave him. I'm just going to leave him alone. And I just don't like the fact that there's such an easy recipe to counter his offensive game. The Suns need multifaceted guys. They need two-way guys. And it just seemed like such a Suns pick, man. I felt like I could see this coming from a mile away. Like, in a lot of ways, I kind of feel like the Suns already have 2 or 3 guys like this already on their roster.
Well, hold on now. I mean, he is a crazy defender.
He's a great defender, but it's just, I don't know, man. Come playoff time, like, I just don't like having these guys that you can just expose and completely drop off and not worry about offensively. I feel like that hinders all the great stuff that you can do offensively. But it does address a very big need for Phoenix. They need guys who can play roles. They need guys who can defend. Ryan Dunn's going to do that immediately.
I don't hate the pick, because I do think Dunn is an exceptional defender. And I think that there is definitely value in that for Phoenix. Like, this is a dude who is not just the best perimeter defender in this class. He's an awesome rim protecting wing. He averages 2.3 blocks per game. He's a really good rebounder. I mean, crazy length, 7'2" wingspan, awesome mover, really good athlete overall. And he's going to bring constant, hellacious effort on the defensive side. Like, he's going to be an awesome defender. But he's sort of going to fall into like that Matisse Thybulle world of, okay, he's an awesome defender. Is he playable offensively? That Andre Robertson world of awesome defender. Is he playable offensively? That is unequivocally my concern, because he's a really good athlete and he's a really good cutter. And he finds the ways to use that athleticism in transition and whatnot. But I mean, he's just a brutal shooter of the basketball. He's 20% from deep. He's 53% from the line. I see no reason to think that he's going to figure that shot out. If he did, great. I mean, that would make this a really good pick, but he's as long a shot to figure his three-point shot out as anybody in this class. Like, it's really, really far away. So that's where I'm with you. For the Suns, you just need guys who can play both sides of the ball capably. If they could have gotten a Terrence Shannon, then that would have been great. Unfortunately, that guy was off the board at this point. The Keyshawn Georges, whoever you might have wanted to take in that sort of 3-and-D wing role, Jalen Tyson, like a lot of those guys had gone off the board at this point. So from that perspective, I understand, hey, let's just take the defensive stud and hope we can carve some value out for him offensively. Hope that he's able to take advantage of the attention that our ball handlers demand and cut and crash the offensive glass. I don't hate the pick, but I am worried about him just being unplayable offensively. Okay, last pick of the first round, Logan. These Boston Celtics get Baylor Shireman out of Creighton. How did you like this pick?
Racially motivated pick. This is a racially motivated pick.
Sad but true. Sad but true.
I just cannot believe Boston did this again. This is almost like a middle finger, man. They're like, we won the title. We have basically all of our rotation pieces in place. We're gonna take
another Caucasian.
We're gonna take another white guy. So
another white American, nonetheless. That's the craziest part. They load up on the white Americans.
Pritchard, Hauser, Shireman, Cornette. Am I missing any? I feel like I'm missing one guy.
No. Well, they put Svi out there in the all-white lineup, but he's not American.
Shvi Mikhailuk. Like, dude, like Boston. What are you guys doing? What are you guys doing, man? I had Shireman as a second-round draft prospect. I really wondered if – I know a lot of college basketball heads love this guy. They love his polish. They love how he relocates off ball and shoots. And you know what? In a lot of basketball situations, I really wonder if Shireman works where he has to play an elevated role. Defensively, I worry about him athletically, but I think he's probably going to work in Boston. He's a really good positional rebounder. He may be a little slower. He's not explosive, but he can rebound at a high level. I think he can probably defend in a team context, and he can shoot the hell out of the pill. He's probably going to work for Boston. Boston figures out how to make these gangly, goofy white guys work in their system, and Shireman's probably going to work here in Boston. So in a lot of other spots, I probably wouldn't like this pick, but Boston's probably going to figure out how to make it work for this kid.
I like the pick. Now, to beat a dead horse one more time, I would have preferred Filipowski here. If they were going to go with the white guy route, take the white big who can play the 4 and the 5, which is exactly what you need. You need a third legit big as a Horford and Porzingis safety valve. Surprised they didn't do that, but I do like Shireman. I think he's pretty darn high floor. Lot of really good offensive traits from him. Elite shooter, 39% from deep, 82% from the line in his college career. Nails off movement, curling around screens, coming off handoffs. Just an awesome three-point shooter. And although he is not a guy who is like going to be a primary ball handler for you, especially not in Boston, obviously, but like nowhere was he going to be a high volume pick and roll ball handler. He was a 98th percentile pick and roll creator, though. He's got really good feel. He's a smart guy, elite shooter, really good rebounder, as you mentioned. The concern is the limited athleticism, but I think he has the right mentality defensively. I think he competes, and it's sort of like Sam Hauser, right? There's nothing about Sam Hauser on paper that says that guy's going to be able to defend, but you put him in these isolation situations against Kyrie, against Luka. He's moving his feet. He's defending hard. He's got good backline help behind him. Got good defenders all around him. Guy's able to hang in there enough. I think that Shireman could bring a similar injection of shooting from the second unit with even a little bit more ball handling. All right. Who are the best guys still out there, Logan, for day 2?
To beat a dead horse one more time, I think Kyle Filipowski is one of the best 5s available. I also like another ACC big man who can stretch the floor. I mentioned this guy in the pre-draft, our previews. I really like Quentin Post out of Boston College. I think he can really shoot. I think he can put the ball on the floor. He is a little older. He's 24 years old, but I don't look at that as a negative. I look at that as experience in college. Like, I think the guy can play immediately. It's not the most valuable archetype, but he is a skilled 5, and if you need a guy like that, I think he can play. I think your boy Tyler Kolek, I am shocked that he is still available. This guy immediately can come in here and be a great bench point guard. I feel in a lot of similar ways about Cam Spencer out of UConn. I think that guy brings veteran poise and polish and decision-making and craftiness. I think he could be a bench point guard immediately. And another guy I mentioned too, I really like Antonio Reeves. He's another one of these older college guys. He's 23 years old out of Kentucky. little bit of a smaller guard. You worry about him defensively with his slight of frame, but great touch, great intermediate game, floater touch, good shooter of the basketball off movement. And again, man, he just brings some veteran polish. So all of these guys, I think, could be like immediate impact bench players from day one. And I expect all of them to get drafted. I wouldn't be surprised if Quentin Post didn't get drafted, but I would definitely send him an undrafted free agent contract if he was still available. But those other three guys, or four guys, excuse me, I definitely think they should get drafted.
Top of the second, to me, Filipowski and Kolek are the two best dudes out there. Just offensive games that are very polished, that I'm very confident in. And if you're the Bucks, man, there's something of a chance for redemption for you. You're picking at 33. Again, like, to me, the 3-and-D wing is the best archetype. And then I don't know if maybe you look at, like, McCullough out of Kansas, where you're not necessarily extremely confident in the offensive game, but it does make sense in terms of the archetype. He's just got to prove that he's a more consistent shooter at the next level. But Filipowski, I think, having a versatile big would be good for them. Those are just two guys I'm very confident in translating, and I am surprised that they made it this far. Anybody that needs a second unit point guard, take Tyler Kolek, man. He's a dog. He's a leader. He's shifty. He's super crafty. He's a really good shooter. He's a really good passer. He has his limitations defensively, but he competes. Going to be a good NBA player. Going to be a guy you want on your team. Any final thoughts, Logan, before we get out of here?
Can I drop a Nas Reed real quick?
You can drop a Nas Reed real quick. All right, let me ask you. We talked about some of our favorite individual picks. Biggest winner of day one of the draft overall. Who was
Minnesota.
it?
Minnesota.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah, man, the value that they got.
The Joe Biden.
The value that they got Dillingham at, to me, is exceptional. And again,
Wow.
I wonder about long-term what happens with Dillingham. But the guy has a star ceiling for sure, I think. Like, you know, in the best world, I think Dillingham has that ceiling. But I think he's in a perfect role where if he doesn't reach that, like, you know, he works immediately still, where he can be a productive NBA player from day one. And I was just so high on Terrence Shannon Jr. coming into day one to get both of those guys who, again, I like their upside. I like their long-term prospects, but I also like how they play immediately. Like Tim Connolly crushed day one. And, again, it's about the value for Dillingham. If they had given up more, you know, I'd be like, damn, man, you gave up way too much. They gave up 2 firsts in 6 or 7 years. I mean, who cares, man?
And one of them's a swap.
Yeah, exactly. So I think Minnesota and Utah. Utah is a huge winner to me.
Utah.
To get Cody Williams at 10 and to get Collier at 29, I mean, that's like, those are 2 top 10 guys on my draft board that you get at 10 and at 29. Both of those teams, exceptional value, exceptional prospects. I think both of those Northwest teams crushed the draft.
Yeah, I really like what Utah did. The one winner who we haven't shouted out, just the Wizards getting Alex Sarr at number 2, just to me, getting the best player in the draft. They're basically starting blank slate. Now, if you look at the totality of the day, I didn't love them trading away Denny for what they did, but I did really like them getting Sarr. I like them getting Keyshawn George. I think that that's a pretty solid 3-and-D wing right now. The guy's going to be able to shoot the ball for sure and bring you some playmaking. And I like Bub Carrington at number 14 for them. I think maybe that's a little bit high in a vacuum, but not too high. And he's like a really skilled shot maker, one of the most skilled offensive guards in this class for sure. So I liked that from them. On the flip side of the whole Minnesota thing, I'm wondering what's going on with San Antonio. I'm wondering why they did that deal, why they didn't sit and pick at 8 if they wanted their offensive guard, Dillingham or Topic. If they wanted a wing, Cody Williams or Buzelis. Like, I really like what they did with Castle at 4. I think getting an athletic, defensive-minded playmaking guard like that is good. And we're just waiting for them to pair him with the offensive guard and Wemby, and then you got a really good foundation. I'm just kind of wondering why they made that trade, because it doesn't make sense to me on its face.
Well, it makes you wonder if there's something that San Antonio's planning on the back end, right? Are they planning some sort of star deal where they're going to take those picks and package them along to get somebody?
Yeah.
Who knows?
Yeah, I mean, they've got 2 firsts down the line. I'd rather have the 8th pick this year than first in 2030 and in 2031 from Minnesota, who's probably still going to be pretty good. But interesting stuff. They do pick again early in the second round, so it'll be fun to see where they go with that. And with that, we're done here, folks. These have been our draft thoughts. Hope you enjoyed. This ended up being a pretty fun draft season. I know that there was a lot of shitting on this draft. Not to say that we are guiltless in that. I mean, it is one of the weaker drafts. But most of that is because of like just lacking top end studs. Once you appreciate the depth of this class, some of the quality role players, some of the high floor guys you could take in the top 10, then you like them. And that's kind of one of my biggest takeaways is just don't underestimate the value of a floor in this class. I thought our friend Jokic Joestar said something pretty good on Twitter today about people disliking the Zach Edey pick. And he said his biggest takeaway from that is that people really undervalue Ivica Zubac because that's like the intuitive comp for Zach Edey. Zach Edey's got to shoot 65% inside the paint outside the restricted area. Let's not undersell Zubac's touch, but he's pretty darn good there, and he's massive. He's even more massive, and he's going to protect the rim even though he'll struggle to guard in space. I think there's validity to that. Getting a good starter in this draft anywhere is a win. So there you go. Those are our thoughts, folks. Hope you enjoyed. If you did, there's plenty more Nerd Sesh content across our YouTube channel. You can listen to the show across all audio platforms. Follow us across social, TikTok and Instagram at Nerd Sesh, Twitter at Nerd_Sesh. Join our Discord. Check out our merch at thevolume.com. All of that would just be so, so nice and show us that you love us just as much as we love you, because we do. Oh, we love you guys. So with that, as always, I've been Carson Brabber.
I have been Logan Camden.
And this was Nerd Sesh.